Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Today is the next in the series of our Authority podcasts, and I'm super excited to introduce you to one of the members of my team, the amazing Taylor. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
Oh my God, it's so much fun having you here and getting to talk all things sacral with you. Far out. Let's have some fun.
I'm here for it.
All right. So, in this episode, we're talking about the sacral, and the sacral is the authority that has the most deep, in the moment, I'm going to say almost like reliable response. Like, this is the authority that, let's be honest, we're all a little bit jealous we don't have, because it gives you in any one moment the truth of what is correct and what is incorrect for you. Now, one of the things that is important to understand is that the the sacral doesn't see into the future, and it's not concerned with the past. It's always talking about in the now. So let's kick off. I'm going to ask you some really cool questions. Would you say, and let's start, like, when we know we're listening to our sacral, we get a physical response, and we also might have especially because Taylor's an MG, there's like an audible noise. So generators will be where an MG might be like, I know for me, I go yep, okay, things like that. But so would you say, kicking off, do you consciously listen to your sacral?
I do now. I didn't used to. But now that I know what that actually is, I listen to it all the time, and I never knew what it was. I knew it was always there because I grunt to myself. Like, I'll make noises, like I do more of the like or like if I'm not sure, or like and also, like, in my physical body, it feels like a pull, like forward or backward or something like that. And I never knew what that was, but I actually had coworkers and friends who would like make fun of me and be like, are you like making, like, did you say something? And I'm like, the noises I would make, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But once I learned human design and learned what that was, I was like, oh, that must be what that is. And then I started paying more attention to it as like a decision making tool.
Oh my God, I love it. And I love what you said. So one thing I want to just pinpoint for those out there is that so many people, we all talk about the and the but there is the one in the middle, like and I do that noise too, like and this, what I want you all to understand is that this is like, it's almost like the sacral saying, not now. It's like, I don't have an answer for you now. Or maybe it's a yes and this isn't the right timing. So there is also that middle ground that Taylor was talking about. I love it. And you spoke about how it actually feels in your body, like it physically moves you forward or contracts. I resonate with that as well. Like, I feel it's almost like there's a little rope tied to my belly, and it's like, whoa, we're going this way. Or I will close my shoulders down kind of around my chest if it's a no. So that's really cool. So tell me about your journey to really start to listen and trust your authority. Because when we first come to human design and we say, all right, we need to get out of the mind and into the body, and now you need to listen to whatever this part of you, and in this case is your gut, our mind starts screaming like, what now? We can't reason. And I mean, you're a line one as well, so a lot of information is important to you. So how did that relationship go? How did that journey go, moving from someone that potentially was making very detail rich decisions through the mind into a really detailed, minimal, simple yes no with the gut? Tell me a bit about that.
That journey came with a lot of resistance for sure, especially because I'm so left-brained and like analytical. I'm always up here thinking, analyzing, all of those sorts of things. And so when I learned that, I came to human design in, like, I think it was 2018. And immediately I was just validated by reading these things, especially about authority and about my type. That's about as far as I went, just at first, because it's a lot of information. And growing up, I was always told what to do. I was always given the decisions for me, like, here's what you're going to do, and this is why you're going to do it. And so in my adult life, I sought out, like, I was very comfortable in situations where I was being told what to do by positions of authority. I had corporate jobs. I was just, sitting at a desk, punching in my, time, being told what to do. And I was, I wasn't fine with it. I told myself I was fine with it. Um, and so when I learned that, I was like, holy crap, like, and so I think that journey for me came with a lot of resistance because I knew that it was there, that little whisper. I like to call it like a whisper almost. Sometimes it's very loud, but sometimes it's not, especially when you're not listening to it and you're in the mind. And I always knew it was there, but I knew that I ignored it, and I had a hard time trusting it. Like, what if it leads me in the wrong direction? Because like I said, I'm so left brain and analytical that I'm always, thinking about things and overthinking and analyzing and planning and all of those sorts of things. And then there comes this piece of information when I'm learning about human design that's like, all you have to do is respond, right? I remember listening to the audio tapes of Ra talking. He was like, all you have to do is respond. And I kept thinking, it can't be that simple. But when I started experimenting with it, I found out that it was. And I started with small things like they suggest, just the small things like, do I want to eat this right now? No. Do I want pizza? Yes. Do I want a salad? No. Like those little, yes, no's in the small way. I think I felt more comfortable with that, and then went more into like the bigger decisions and learning to trust it. And I would notice too that the second my mind got involved, I would notice what I was doing, because it comes so fast. Like it happens so
Yeah.
fast that you can miss it. And, I remember being presented with decisions where I would feel like that, oh, I don't want to do that. And I'd like, someone would ask me what to, to do something, be like, oh no. And then my people pleasing self would be like, yeah, sure. And, and I could feel that conflict between my mind and what my body was telling me. And it created anxiety for me. That was the
Yeah.
physical response. I knew that was like, these two things are not in alignment, like what my body is telling me and what my brain is starting to tell me. So I think for me, it was just noticing those things,
Mm.
and being aware of how different what my physical body was doing versus, or like those grunting noises that I was making versus
Mhm.
what I was verbally saying or like agreeing to or deciding, or what was going on in my mind. If they were very different, I would step back and take a look and be like, okay, where am I not honoring that response? And so just knowing about it empowered me to use it, because I finally understood what it was and how to use it. So that's kind of
Yeah.
how that journey went. But the resistance, oh my God, just because I'm so logical, and it was so hard for me to trust, that I had to take it in baby steps for sure.
Yeah. I love that. And you said a few things that are so important. Like number one, resistance. The resistance comes from the mind. And we're literally saying, oh, excuse me, mind. But no, we're taking the power away from you and giving it to somebody else. So of course there's going to be heavy resistance. But this is part of the journey. It's part of that ability to just drop in and start to trust. The other things that I thought were just brilliant that you mentioned, oh my God, it just entered my head. Exited my head. What was it you said? I've got to learn to write this shit down. So
Happens to
now
me.
that I'm searching for it, right. So one of the things that you said that's super, super important that I loved, that I want to reiterate because I think it's very powerful, is whenever we move into starting to listen to our authority, and even if you're not sacral, is this ability to start practicing your authority with small things. I say with the things that don't matter. What I mean is the things that your brain doesn't, or your mind doesn't have an attachment to, because they're going to be harder. And that'll be like, oh, I don't feel it. I don't know if it is a yes or a no. I can't really understand it. And this is because of the attachment that you have, either to the resistance of trusting it or to the decision being made by the mind. So being really confident in just taking small things, what to eat, where to go, what time to go to bed, like the simple things that really don't have big consequences, is a great place to start with practicing your authority. I think that's really, really, really profound. And then there was another piece which will come to me. Is the speed in which the sacral response happens. Now, if you're a pure generator, your sacral response is quick. If you're an MG, it's super quick. If you have the gate 34, it's super, super, super quick. So what can happen is that you don't even know. If you're an MG with a 34, you don't even know you're responding. It's happening so fast. So paying attention to when something feels like a yes, when you're heading in that direction, like notice your energy, not your mind. The moment you start saying, oh, was that a yes or was that a no? What was that? You're back in your mind, okay? So you did blink and miss it, but that's okay if you just get back into your body, because the sacral is responding in every single moment. So let's say someone says, Taylor, do you want to go out for dinner? And you're like, that was so quick. I'm not sure. You can literally just relax, take time out. And then by the time they ask you again, you'll be like, yep, I'll go. So the thing with the sacral is it's always responding. There's always something to, there's always something. So if your mind tells you that you missed it, just wait for a couple of seconds, a minute, and something else will come for you to respond to. So never worry about that. Does that resonate with you?
Oh yeah. And I was laughing when you were talking, because I was going to say that earlier and I forgot, but when you were talking about how your mind will be like, was that a yes or was that a no? Like I'll overanalyze whether or not it was a yes or a no. And then I have to like pause and take a step back and like, I'll almost ask myself again and be like, with the intention of like listening for that initial response, because I would do that. It happens so fast. And when I would be intentional about asking myself if I was like practicing, like, do I want to eat this right now? Or, with those little things that you were talking about, even with that, if I was in the intention of practicing, I would still let my mind be like, well, was that really a yes? Or are you just thinking about it too much because like just going down the spiral? And I would it almost made me want to step away from it and be like, I can't do this. It's too hard. But I pushed through that, and I just started to learn to listen. But yeah, I was laughing when you said that because I do that all the time. And, knowing that you can re-ask or like wait to be asked again, and that's okay if you miss it. My perfectionist wanted to come out initially and be like, no, I have to get it right on the first try.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I love what you said about that piece, because I hear this, I'm hearing this more and more, is that, it's too hard. I may as well just give up on human design because I can't work it out. And what I want you to understand is what's actually happening in your brain is because behavioral change is happening. So the reason why you go into the spiral, the reason why you go into, I don't know, is it, I don't know, when you go into freak out and it's too hard, that is actually your mind stopping you from going there. It's literally, imagine the, fear up in your brain, like, we have to throw everything at this because she's taking the power away. Oh my God, tell her anything to stop it. So really understanding that if you are in this journey with your authority and you're like, I don't get it, I don't feel it, I don't understand it, this is actually the mind, the unconscious brain is like, oh God, there's change happening. We need to do something about it. So just persevering, taking a step back. This is all energy. You're feeling it all the time. As a generator, you're responding all the time. So just let the next thing come and just take the pressure off yourself, because it's really important. Like you can't, this is the thing with authority. You can't fuck it up. You can't get it wrong. You just have to just notice what happens. You don't have to do anything.
So comforting.
Yeah, I love it. So tell me, what is specifically different? So is there a time in the past that you can remember where you're like, oh, I just feel I should go this way, but you let your mind jump in and make the decision for you? Like, do you have an example that you could maybe share that the listeners would resonate with, where you just overrode that sacral, and what was the outcome?
Oh, so many. How do I pick just one? When I think about that, I think about that a lot with work situations in particular. And I can think of one in particular with just accepting a job in general that I should not have accepted. And I feel like that's really common for people because we get into the mindsets of, scarcity around money and security and fear that nothing else will work out. So we say yes, even when we know we shouldn't say yes, or we feel that there's our body's telling us something different. We override it because of those stories we tell ourselves about money and all of that and security. And so when I first moved to California, I was just looking for a job because we had to like prove income to be able to find a place to live, to be able to secure an apartment. And there were so many things happening because I was just living out of a car for a few days, And so there was so much stress around the situation that I was just trying to find something. And I walked into a gym because I used to be a personal trainer and I hated it. When I moved from the Midwest to California, I didn't want to be a personal trainer anymore. I was burnt out on it. It wasn't me. I didn't like it anymore. But I walked into a gym because I was desperate and I sat down in front of, the hiring manager and I was really honest with him about like I need a job or whatever. And he offered me this position, personal training. And I just accepted it because I was like, great, I can get this offer letter today. I can get the apartment. It'll be income. If I have to find something else, I will, but this is perfect. And it ended up being the absolute worst job I have ever had in my entire life. First of all, he didn't even hire me to be a personal trainer, and he didn't tell me that. He hired me to be like a sales person for selling personal training, but not actually servicing it. And he didn't tell me that. My first month, I only got paid like, I don't know, it was some super low amount that I could barely buy food. They took away all of the commission that I made. Even though I made commission, they took it all away because I didn't cross a certain threshold, even though it was money that I earned. And so there were all these things happening. My coworkers were not nice. They would took advantage of me. They would ask me to do certain things that weren't in my job description. It was just a snowball of things like letting me know, like, hey,
Yeah.
this was not the right decision. And I knew there sitting in front of him, when I look back on it now, sitting in front of him in that job interview, I knew I don't want to work here. I don't want to work for you. I didn't like his energy, but I was so desperate for a job. I was in that scarcity mindset of I'm not going to find anything else, that I just said yes. And it ended up being the worst like few months of my professional life, we'll call it, because it was just a nightmare. Sometimes I still look back on it and like shudder a little bit of like, oh
Yeah.
God, that was awful.
Yeah.
And then it made me even more resentful towards like personal training, which, wasn't what I wanted. But yeah, that's the best thing I can think of.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's such a perfect example. And God, I resonate. I took a job from when I was working at a TV network, and there was an ad agency that I wanted to go to. But I took a job somewhere else, and same thing. It was like the worst 3 months of my life. Until, had I been patient, that agency, that my dream agency, wanted me. The moment I resigned, they're like, oh my God, why didn't you tell us that you wanted to go anywhere? We would have hired you in seconds, and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So
Same. The second I quit that job,
yeah,
I quit without having another job. And then it was like, I put it out to the universe, like I need something different. I walked in, I quit, best feeling ever. And then that same day, I got an email from just this random hiring recruiter that was like, we found your resume online and think this job would be perfect for you. And I had that job for 2 years and it served me really well. It worked
I
out great.
love that. And because my next question was when you do listen to it. And I think that this is the perfect example, like you, and this is something for me far out, no matter what your freaking type or authority, let me be super clear that as human beings, when we let our mind lead, we go the hard way. Because, and this is something for me all the time, like trusting in ease and flow. And, just because you have broad shoulders and you're capable doesn't mean you have to. And the other thing to understand is that when we think we know better than the universe, like we have to have all the answers, we need to know what direction we're going in, it's on us, then that's what we get. We get a shitty job. The moment we go, fuck, actually, I know nothing, and all that I know is I'm out. I'm done. I'm out of here. Then all of a sudden, all the doors and windows open to other opportunities. And I think that we're so lucky to have human design in our lives so that we can really see how we can actually do this. Like we don't just have to trust the universe. Like with nothing, we can just, in your case, sometimes in my case, even though I'm emotional, having that sacral, just listen, just do those things that are a bit out there, and you will be rewarded instead of letting the mind. Go ahead.
My favorite example of listening to my authority and not knowing I was doing it, but I look back on it now and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I trusted that feeling, is I mentioned that I moved to California 5 years ago from the Midwest. So anyone who knows the United States, I was in Missouri, and we call it misery as a joke, just because I don't know, it's a great place, but I didn't really like it. I was unhappy. And my best friend was visiting California, who I lived with at the time in St. Louis in Missouri, but she was visiting a friend in California. And I was sitting on my grandma's couch, my dad was there, and I was just unhappy, and I didn't want to be there. I was in between things. I didn't know what was next for me in my life. And I got a text from my friend, and all it said was, I think I found our new home. Okay. And I looked at it, and in that moment, the only thing I responded with is I just said, I trust you. And that was it. And it was like in that moment, like I still have a screenshot of that text, because it was so, we'll use it as a joke now, but it was so funny because I just immediately, without thinking about it, I was just like, I trust you. And instead I could have gone into, oh my God, California is the most expensive place to live in the United States. What kind of job am I going to have? What am I going to do out there? How am I going to move all of my stuff? My family's here. Can I really leave my family? Like I could have gone in all the stories, but without knowing what I was doing in that moment, I just said, I trust you. And then 3 months later, we packed up our cars, sold everything else, and drove 27 hours across the country and just started over. And it all worked out. Like, I can't imagine if I hadn't done that. I don't know what my life would be like. I don't know what I would be doing. I don't want to think about it, because I know that was the best decision. And so that's my favorite example, like my personal example of listening to my authority in a moment where I could have gone into so many stories and talked myself out of the best thing I've ever done.
Oh my God, I love it. And I'm covered in goosebumps. So good. So what's your biggest challenge, or what has been the biggest challenge of really learning to trust it? I mean, being able to just be like, I trust you. And I get that this was probably in more of a place where you are unconscious to the sacral and the mechanics of it. But tell me, like, how have you learnt to trust it? What's been the biggest challenge in really being, okay, I'll go with you to California without any idea, and subsequent?
I think the biggest challenge has been not ever learning to be spontaneous, or I don't know if that's the right word, but I grew up in a household where everything was planned. Everything has an itinerary, everything has a schedule, everything has a rhyme, a reason, a way. It's this way or no way. And everything is very structured and regimented. And so doing anything that's spontaneous or off the cuff or spur of the moment, or that goes against those stories, that's probably what the answer to that question is my biggest barrier to it was just all the stories about money, about security. I was taught how to make a budget when I was 10,
Wow.
so I had all these stories around, you have to, my life trajectory was supposed to be, and I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see, the whole go to school, you graduate, get married, get a job, get a house, have kids, retire, and then like enjoy your life. And something always felt really uncomfortable about that to me. And so anything that kind of wiggled outside of that was always a big no, it was taboo. And so it was hard for me to trust that, inner knowing, or that sacral telling me to go a different direction than anything that fell within those parameters that I had been taught, like, this is the way that you do life. And it created so many stories and so much resistance. But I started to see how, even though I would stray outside of those lines of what I thought my life should be, it always ended up better, even though it was scary. And so I started to learn to trust it more when I would just kind of go off the cuff or do what my body was actually telling me, even though it terrified me, like to the point of like armpit sweat. Like, I would just do it and it would work out better. And I'd be like, well, there was something to that. So maybe I'll trust it a little bit again. And like the whole moving to California thing, that was a big decision. I was terrified and I did it anyway. And it ended up being the best decision of my life. So I can, in the moments where I'm scared to listen to it, or I feel a story, I remind myself of all the different times where I was in the same situation and it worked out for the best. So this time won't be any different.
Yeah. I love that. Oh my God, that's so good. And this is it, you know, because I imagine that everyone listening as well, having this example or this experience of, it feels really uncomfortable to trust it, because it doesn't, like, the sacral isn't telling you why or what or how. It's not telling you any of those things. It's just telling you yes, no. So you really have to learn to build that faith in it. And that's all authorities. You just have to build that faith.
Mm-hmm.
And like I always say, and you've heard me say a million times on the podcast, reverse engineering and finding the evidence of why this works is really powerful for changing a habit in your brain. So I love that. So give us an example of how you use your sacral in everyday life. Like, do you use it if you, like, I know one thing that comes up for me that my sacral definitely has a say on is breaks. So if I'm working away and being an MG, I have the gate 9, I love to just dive deep and get really into something. And I notice that all of a sudden I'll be changing something, I'll be doing something, and all of a sudden I have this response of, oh, I need a break. I won't often do it. I mean, I won't sometimes do it, but more often than not now I'll listen to it. And even food. Again, I'm emotional, so I have to have a few goes at everything. But for you, how do you use your sacral just in everyday life? It's simple things.
I ask myself a lot of questions, and I find that that is helpful. I mean, I work from home in front of a computer, so I'm not often being presented, with questions from other people, unless they're messaging me about something. But I find that, well, with the breaks thing, I was resonating with that because I'm the type of person who struggles to take breaks because I'm more of the, I'm an MG. I've got a lot of energy. When I'm lit up by something, I'm lit up by it. But when I start to not have the energy for something anymore, that's when I know. Or when I'm caught in that, like, instead of like a yes or a no, if I'm too much, like if I find myself keeping, like if I'm indecisive, that's the word I'm looking for. If I'm really indecisive, then I know I need to take a break. Or if what's previously lit me up isn't lighting me up at the moment, I'm like, well, I'm going to walk away from it. That is where I really dive into like using my sacral, is with like breaks and like what I should say yes and no to in my work, because that's been the hardest for me to learn. So I put a lot of emphasis on that. And then I think I unconsciously do it with little things like, what I'm going to eat, or what time I should go to bed, or, if my friends ask me, do you want to take a walk, or do you want to go have lunch? Little things like that. I've gotten really good at not thinking too hard about those ones. There's those small little things. I do that pretty easily. But with the bigger things that I have the most resistance to not listening to, like taking breaks and saying yes when I really mean no, because I am a people pleaser by nature. I put more emphasis on asking myself. I like what you always say, like ask yourself better questions. So I do that a lot.
Love it. I love it. And that this is really powerful. Like, you can use your journal for this as well, just writing down questions as well as asking yourself, for those listeners who feel like, maybe even asking yourself questions, you're not getting a clear enough answer. You can either journal it, you can get a friend to ask you yes, no questions. You can practice it in many ways. Don't let your mind, your unconscious mind or your ego tell you that it's not working, because it is working. But you can just find a different way and it'll work. It's working all the time. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Well, yeah, the other way I've been leaning more into using my sacral and understanding it is, when I started learning more about it, and one of the most powerful things for me was learning about quitting and letting things go, and only quitting in response, and learning about that whole concept. That was really hard for me, but really good to understand, because that was something that always confused me coming into human design, is because, if you look at the fact that I have sacral authority and that I'm an MG, it's like I am here to start things, but maybe not necessarily finish them. It's like, when is the right time to let something go? When is the right time to, quit something? How do I know? What if I just feel like quitting? You know, I shouldn't even use the word quit, but like if I'm ready to let something go, how do I know if it's the right time? And so recently it was really powerful for me to learn about that. And I know you and I had a conversation about this, but I want to share it, is that I was presented with the idea that you only quit in response and you have to wait for something to respond to. And so when I am feeling like I don't want to do this anymore, whatever it is, a project, a work thing, something in my personal life, like I don't have the energy for this anymore, but there's nothing external to respond to for like, you know, oh, I'm going to let this go. Now I was presented with something to respond to. I asked myself the question, okay, if I'm not being presented with something to respond to, but I don't feel like doing this anymore, there's two things that I look at. It's number one is does it still have something to teach me, which is why it's not ready to let it go yet, even though I feel like I'm done with whatever this thing is. If I'm not being presented with the opportunity to let it go, it still has something to teach me. Or I'll ask myself the really hard question is, do I really want to let it go, or am I in resistance to doing whatever the thing is? And so I'm telling myself I want to let it go. So that, I think, has been the most powerful thing for me with my authority, is understanding that, because that was the thing I could never wrap my head around, was the whole letting things go. Like, when is it the right time to say no when it was previously a yes? And that just helped clear it up and give me two avenues to look at when I'm in that moment.
Oh my goodness, I love it. I feel like I've shared that conversation in every facet because it's so powerful. It's the difference between a trigger and a truth. It's a difference between resistance and fear, you know, or resistance and lesson. You know, there's still something to be learned here. And I think that that's one, you know, it's one of my bugbears with human design, is that there are too many people going, well, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Bullshit. Change and growth are uncomfortable. There is no way that you can evolve as a human being, heal the things that need healing, and achieve the things you want to achieve by feeling absolutely excited and perfect all the time. However, there is a massive difference once you get the hang of growth, that when faced with a challenge, you're not afraid of it, you lean into it, you know. And I think this is the piece that you're talking about as well, like really going, okay, let's be honest, am I just resisting something I don't want to do? Because most people are resisting what they don't want to do. And I had another conversation with someone recently on the exact same thing, and she was about to give up doing all, like, just throw in the towel on all the work that she'd been doing to follow something else that felt better. And I'm like, you know, the way I grew my business, the way, and it continues to grow, is that I had a mantra from a small business to a good sized business of, I have to be prepared to do what other people won't do. And that is not going to feel comfortable all the time. But one thing I have learned is that when it's resistance and you lean into it and you do it anyway, it's like it just disappears. Like that uncomfortable feeling disappears. And then if it's something that you don't want to do, the response to quit, to stop doing that thing, just, it's right there around the corner. But until you actually stop resisting it, there won't come something to respond to quit, because you haven't learned the lesson to stop resisting, to literally accept yourself and life exactly where it's at, you know. And it could be something, and we didn't talk about this, but it could be something as simple as, you know, your perfectionism saying, well, if it's not perfect, then I don't want to do it. Whereas the lesson is, you just need to complete. Just complete. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just complete so you can move on. And as much as you resist that piece, it's actually letting the perfectionism, the unresourceful ego part, win, you know, and create and maintain a pattern of behavior that isn't serving you. So I think this is such a powerful and important thing for all generators, because if you've got a defined sacral, you are very freaking lucky, because you are just looking for something external of you to respond to. The yeses go in this direction, and the no's, this is no longer working for you. And if you don't have those things, then you need to, like Taylor said, get super honest with yourself and see what still needs to be learnt or moved through. I love that. Oh my God, it's so good. So with generator types, we talk a lot about asking yes no questions. We've talked a bit about it already, and one of the challenges can be being able to answer more open-ended questions. So with the sacral, do you or at least I'm not even going to get complicated about my question, does that resonate with you? That sometimes you can feel a bit like, oh, I don't know how to answer this because it's not a yes no question. And then now knowing that your sacral probably just has too much information and needs to chunk it down, do you have a process, or how do you start to make sense of answering an open-ended question with that sacral response?
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because what I default to if someone asks me a question that isn't yes or no is I just say, I don't care, whatever you want, because I don't know how to answer it in the moment. And it could be something super small, like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, oh, I don't care, whatever you want, it's fine. But if they ask me, like, do you want Thai food? Like, that's my favorite. Like, do you want Thai food? Yes. Oh my God, always yes. Do you want Mexican food? No, like, I'm good. Like, I can answer that really quickly. But most people are like, what do you want to do for dinner? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I don't care. So I just default to that. Like, and then I hand the power back over to someone else. And I'm like, and then if they make a decision that, because I said, I don't care, do what you want. Then if they make a decision and I'm like, crap, I really didn't want that. But I didn't, I responded too quick and I just said, oh, I don't care. It's something I'm exploring, but I think that I don't want to be the person who, like, will, with my closest friends who understand human design, because I talked to all my closest friends about it. I've like looked up all their charts and we've had like conversations about it or whatever, is I'll notice that after I told them about that whole like yes or no question thing, that they'll make more of an effort to ask me a yes or no question. Or like my best friend that I live with, if she asks me an open-ended question, like something simple, like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, just look at her blankly. She'll be like, sorry, do you want? And then she'll ask me more like yes or no questions. But if it comes from, like a source where I'm not gonna like be like, can you reframe that question and ask it to me and like have them break it down, I'll just do it for myself, especially if it's something small. If it's a huge decision, I'll have to take some time. But if it's something simple, I'll just break it down for myself and I'll just check in, like, because I think we can check in with our own authority, like I know a lot of it comes from external, but I can present myself with certain questions and be honest and be like, yes or no, and feel what my body's doing. If it's a huge decision, I have a pendulum that I feel like works really well, or I'll use my body like a pendulum. I've noticed that if you stand up and you close your eyes and you ask yourself a question like yes or no, your body will go forward or backwards or whatever you program it to be. I've dabbled with that. And I think it's just about checking in with your body and not letting the mind go everywhere it wants to go.
Yeah, I love that. And not getting caught up in the words instead of just that sacral response. I love it. So what advice would you give someone that is in a relationship with a sacral being? I feel like you've just kind of touched on a couple of examples, but yeah, what advice, and whether that's a friendship or a partner, what advice do you think they need to know being in a relationship with a sacral authority?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious and like we've talked about is asking more yes or no questions, and kind of looking at their response when you ask them something too, like look at their face or their body language and what their body does. Like if you ask them a question and they kind of like, cower inward, or you notice that they like move away or forward, like how is their body moving versus what their words are? And then you can pick up on, if I go like this and then I say yes, like if I cower inward and then I'm like yes, and it's kind of like a timid, you can kind of be like, are you sure you mean yet? Like and check in, like notice body language, I think is a huge thing, especially if it's a really close relationship, like a partnership, or like a best friend. And then I think for me, being an MG with Sacral Authority, don't tell me to slow down. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me to slow down. And I mean that in like not in like a don't tell me what to do. But like, we don't like being told, you have to do it this way or go at this pace, or you can't go that fast or slow down. If we're lit up and you can see the light coming out of our eyes when we're doing something, like just let us be, let us do the thing. We get all excited. we're going to want to tell you about whatever it is. And even if you don't understand it, you just be like, that's great. That's amazing.
Exactly.
But then too, and I know you talked about this, and it's what gave me this like, realization is like having a champion. You talk about that all the time, that everyone needs a champion, and like someone who, and it's usually just one or two people who actually can say to you like, hey, I feel like you need a break.
Mm.
The people that are closest to you, where it doesn't feel like someone telling you what to do, but someone who knows you well enough to know when you're in that like functional burnout, or you're pushing too hard, or you're blah blah blah, and they can be like, here's a glass of water, and I think maybe like let's take a walk, or do you want to take a break, or do you need some space, do you want some time alone? So just checking in, like, to
Yeah.
see how they're feeling, because with a sacral authority, it's really easy to like just keep going and be in, you talk about that all the time, the functional burnout, and not realize, oh my God, I'm burnt
Mm.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so clever. And yeah, I reckon, everyone needs a champion, but especially these sacral beings, because as they are going, they are, they're in it. They are in the flow, and they can be intense. Now, one of the other, oh no, I'll come back to that. So as a kid, I want you to answer this question from the frame of when you were a child. What advice would you give to parents that have a sacral authority child?
Ask and don't tell, within reason, of course. Because that can be difficult, but I reflect on my childhood experience, and I know I touched on that a little bit, but I was always told what to do, and that was it. There was no, explanation. There was no room for me to decide what it was that I wanted. I got very good at just taking direction, and that's what taught me to override my sacral response.
Yeah.
Is just that you're told what to do, you just do it, sit down, shut up, and do it. That's the conditioning, right? And so I think that within reason, whenever you can, ask, like, get them more involved in their own decision making, so that when they grow up, they know how to ask themselves their own questions, or decide for themselves, and really, learn to listen to that. I think that's just the biggest thing. If it had to be just one thing, it's within reason, when you can, ask and don't tell. It's so easy. I know, I mean, I don't have kids, but I mean, I have friends that have kids. I've got a lot of cousins that are little. In my family, there's a lot of kids. And it's like, I see it so much. It's like, you just tell them what to do. And it can be so easy. Even when I've looked after children that weren't mine, it's so easy just to like look at the child and be like, do this, do that. And I think just pausing, and if you have a child with sacral authority, just involving them in the decisions, like, even if it's those small things, like we talk about cultivating that in ourselves, with this, like starting with the small things like food and all that kind of stuff. Do the same thing with your kids.
Yeah.
You don't have to wake them up every day before school, be like, do you want to go to school today, or do you not? Like, you can just ask them, do you want to help me make the pizzas for dinner, or whatever the thing is, and get them
Yeah.
more involved.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so powerful, because like you said, what it's actually doing is keeping them connected to their sacral. And, out of curiosity, as you were, maybe in your late teens or early 20s, because that had been shut down in you, did you know what you wanted? Did you know to trust
Oh,
what
I
you
had no
wanted?
idea. I had
Yeah.
no idea. And I mean, I'm 29 now, and I think it wasn't until maybe 2 years ago, around 25, where I stopped looking for something external to give me direction, because
Yeah.
that's what I would do, because I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know how to decide what I wanted. I would be described as indecisive by anybody who knew me. And it was because I had no idea, and I was uncomfortable making those decisions for myself, because even if I knew deep down somewhere intuitively what it was that I wanted, I was scared to say yes to that calling or that feeling, because like I was saying earlier, it was outside of these lines and parameters that I had been conditioned to stay in. And so I would always just, would describe it as like floating about, and then just whatever an external force or authority or friend or parent or whoever would tell me to do, be like, okay, sure, no problem. Until then, I'm even more lost. And I think it was around 25 where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like,
Mm.
I can't keep just letting other people dictate my life. And understanding my design, by that point, I understood kind of what was going on. And that's when I started to it's kind of when the human design fell in my lap, and I really started to look at it and start experimenting with that sacral authority and my type and strategy and all the different things, because I was just I got to the point where I was sick of not knowing what I wanted and feeling like I had given all of my power away
Yeah.
to anyone and everything else telling me what to do. So no, I had no idea what I wanted. I didn't have a purpose, none of that.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, this really is evidence of what it feels like to have the sacral switched off or shut down, as the case were. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's going to be so many people that really resonate, like, oh, rightio, it is in there, but it's just been shut down, which is not great. What advice would you give to a coach or a reader working with a sacral authority?
That's a good question. I think as you're going through, like if you're reading someone's human design with a sacral, not every part of our chart or how you might explain it might resonate with the person. And so with someone with sacral, use the yes or no questions to ask them. And you've asked me probably 5 or 6 times already on this podcast, does that resonate with you? That's a yes or no question, right? It's like yes, no, yeah. And then I can go into how it resonates with me or not. And so I think that trying not to what's the word I want to use? Like over guide it, like check in with the person and let them tell you how it's resonating with you so it can feed what it is you're trying to coach them through or say. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And the thing that when you said it like that question I ask all the time, does that resonate? And what's interesting is because what it does is the moment you ask someone that question, they get into their physical body, because resonance is an energetic thing that we do. So people literally, they get into their body and go yes or no. And like you said, and it doesn't matter if they're a sacral being, but it's more important if they're a sacral being. And once you have the yes or no, it's like, okay, I have that experience, and then like you say, you can elaborate on it. So yeah, it's super important. I love that. That's really, really cool. Now, there was one thing that you said early on that I just want to circle back to, and then I also just want to have a quick little conversation for those of you that are like me, that have emotional authority but are sacral as well. So one thing that you said earlier was that you experience anxiety when you have when you're not listening to your sacral and the mind is making all the decisions. Now, when you said that, it was like all these just alarm bells, all these lights just went off in my awareness. Like it was my same experience. When I was doing depression and panic disorder, it was because I'd stopped listening to my physical body. I'd stopped listening to my emotional clarity. I'd stopped listening to my sacral. So if you're out there, and I know so many people out there experiencing mental health issues, this is a massive indicator that you're not listening to your authority, that you in some way have a belief system that says either it's not safe to do it, you're not allowed to do it, or like in Taylor's case, you don't know what you want. So starting to build that muscle slowly but surely of just listening to your sacral, of listening to your authority, is going to help to heal things like anxiety and depression, because really these are just indicators that you're out of alignment. Does that resonate with you?
100%. Yeah. And that's the other thing that I do too, is I nod. That's like I nod all the time. So the whole time you were talking, I'm sitting there nodding. My sacral's like, yes. And so, yeah, I always think of it as all of that energy. Like, we're taught that the sacral is like this huge powerhouse of energy, right? And it's like, if you're not putting it towards like where it's meant to go, I feel like the anxiety is like your sacral's way of telling you like it's not aimed in the right direction. It's like the whisper becomes a scream, and anxiety is a scream, especially if it's severe. I just feel like it's your body's warning sign to you, like, hey, something's out of alignment, something's not right. And I didn't know that for the longest time. When I had it debilitating anxiety, it was during that period of my life where I was talking to you about, like, after I got out of college, and then I'm, between 20 and 25, having no idea what I want to do. I had debilitating anxiety, and I used it as a crutch. And I was in my victim stories about the anxiety. I can't do it because I have anxiety, all the stories. And it was because I wasn't listening, and I didn't know how, and I didn't know what I wanted. And I wasn't giving all of that energy a direction to go, because I got big energy, but I just took it all and I shoved it in, and then it has nowhere to go, or not the right places to go. And it just sits there, and it's like, like, I think I imagine it as like this, like, ball, like, sitting in there with nowhere to go, like this, and just like screaming at me. And that's the feeling of the anxiety, because my anxiety is like that, where I'm pointing is like down, like in like my, belly, or like lower abdomen. And it's like in that area of my body where it feels like this stirring that like can't go somewhere if I'm not
Yeah.
in alignment.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a great description. And I think I've called it before, like the Tassie Devil. It's like the anxiety is like that cartoon character, the Tassie Devil, that just goes around in like a ball of craziness. And I think that is so perfect. And for those out there listening, I can already feel them all going, oh my God, that's exactly it. I know for me, when I was at my low point, it was exactly that. I wasn't engaging my energy in the direction that was aligned for me. I was too busy focusing on the depression, the anxiety, to actually pay attention to everything that needed addressing in my life. So yeah, if you guys are experiencing things like anxiety, then ask yourself a better question. How could I engage my energy in alignment? Or you can be even simpler than that and just ask the universe. This is one of my favorite questions. Show me how I can feel better. Show me how I can engage my energy to heal my anxiety. Show me how I can find purpose. If you start asking those sort of questions, the universe will literally, you will meet people, you will have experiences, you will see in your external reality things that will get you aligning your energy to your purpose. Because at the end of the day, the sacral authority is a sacral being. So it's this big energy that wants to work. It wants to work. And I know for me that when I don't want to work, and I mean, I've got the gate 40, so there's a part of me that doesn't want to work within my cycle, within my wave all the time. But if I want to check out, like if I don't want to work at all, then that goes back to that resistance piece. It's more about the thing that I need to do next is something I don't want to do, or I'm afraid I can't do it, or I'm not good enough, or whatever story my head tells me, as opposed to me saying, whoa, I've got a lot of resistance coming up. But if I go in that direction and I engage this energy on moving through this challenge to grow to this point, then I can face anything. And I think this is one of the really big things to understand with mental health issues, is that your mental health issue is keeping you in your mental health issue. It's not who you are. Like, you hear me say over and over and over and over and over again, I did depression and anxiety. I didn't have it. It wasn't happening to me. It was the way I was thinking. Literally, it was the way I was thinking. Throw into that me being an emotional being. I've got an emotional wave, so I would constantly feel like I'm going 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then I had a story about, I can't do it. So when we start to really go, okay, cool, from an authority point of view, if you're a sacral being, you just want to find that what lights you up, and start small. Just start really small. Like, if you get really honest with yourself, you could go, and I know for me, I can go and I can stand in the supermarket, and I love a bit of chocolate. Don't get me wrong. I love a packet of chips. I'm a healthy person, but these are the two things that I'm quite willing to get into. But if I'm being really honest with myself and I go and stand in front of these things and say, do I want that? I will literally go, And if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, I'll go, And it's really that simple, that you have to trust it and you have to listen to it. And, not eating chocolate might sound like it doesn't matter, but it is. Like, that's a middle question, because that's something that, it's not simple. There's a big attachment to it. It makes you feel better in the moment. It's instant gratification, all of the things that your brain wants. So if you listen to your sacral in those sort of situations where it is a little bit harder, you're going to actually notice that your sacral is going, no, I don't want it. And it's just the mind that says, yeah, but I want to feel better, so I'm going to have that. So start to practice and really trust that. And then when again, with the mental health issues, this could be that what you're doing isn't lighting you up. Okay, so this is a sacral being, you have to be lit up. So what does being lit up mean? Well, if you're in functional burnout, it means something very different to someone who's super in alignment. For me, if I'm lit up, even just sitting on this conversation, I have to keep looking at the clock, because I could quite happily sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours. I'm lit up, I'm excited, time doesn't matter, blah, 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 blah. But if I was in functional burnout, I probably wouldn't have access to the questions. I would be like, okay, cool, we've got to go now. And I can feel my energy lower. So lit up, if I was in that place, would just be like, oh, cup of tea. That feels really good. So again, don't build bullshit stories around what lit up means that you're going to take over the world. Lit up could just mean that you really feel good about a cup of tea or taking a break. So give yourself that ability to feel lit up about the little things as much as being lit up about the big things. Does that resonate for you?
And you made the noise that I make when something is like, when I feel lit up by something, or like my sacral is really happy, or like that satisfaction, it's like that.
Yes.
Like that's it. Like, and that for me, I do that when after a long day and like a really good shower, I like sit on the couch in my sweatpants, I'll make that noise. I'll be like, or if I'm, I do a lot of work on my computer, if I'm doing something for 3 hours and I'm not looking at the clock, and then when it's finished and I look at it and I'll be like, like, job well done, like,
Yeah.
That's how that feels. And it doesn't have to, like you said, it doesn't have to be taking over the world. It doesn't have to be, building a multi-million-dollar business or whatever, the stories are that we tell ourselves. It could just be, sitting on the couch in your sweatpants after a long day and just be like,
Exactly.
like, that's good enough. Like, that can light you up. And believe me, it lights me up most days.
Yeah.
But yeah, just learning to appreciate the small things, I think, because with all that energy, we can think that we have to do, and that's one of the things within human design that's like, not a lot of people talk about it outside of the box of like, we hear the sacral is like, oh, you're just like, you're here to work. And it's like, yes, but we don't just have to be lit up by our work. Let's get out of that story and talk about how else we can be lit up. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. And that's it, like ultimately, especially the generators, you guys, you're all, finding a better way to work. You are changing the face of work, so it doesn't have to be, you have to be lit up sitting at a desk, 7 hours a day for 5 days a week or whatever it is. So just pay attention to those little things that light you up. All right. I think that's it from me. Is that it from you?
That was fun.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I trust that you've got loads of value from learning about sacral authority in real life with some actual human, not just being told what it is. And I was going to talk very quickly to the emotional authority with a sacral like me. Ultimately, your sacral comes second to the emotional authority in the hierarchy. So it's important that although my sacral is talking to me in every moment, and just like pure generators, it's giving me this feedback all the time, I have emotional authority, and it's an awareness center. It is higher up in the hierarchy, and it's higher because it has this relationship to feeling, to the emotional wave, to taking time out. So it's going to have, it's got a little bit more information to give a person like me with that authority. So we have to make sure that ultimately our sacral might say, like the classic for me is deciding what to eat. I'm a person who goes to the cupboard and opens it 3 times. I open the fridge 3 times, and then I'm going to be like, oh yeah, it's that thing. And that's the difference. The sacral will still go, yep, I want that, but I have to see it. I have to see it a few times with my emotional wave, even the mini wave, if you like, has to see it a few times, has to have time to know how it feels about it now and now and now, before the sacral's, whatever the sacral's piping in with can actually be followed. So if you have a defined solar plexus, a lot of what Taylor said today is going to resonate. But remember, you have to slow down, let it just bring emotional clarity to your wave. All right, that really is it. This has been so much fun. I have loved every second of it. Thank you so much for joining, Taylor.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
That's so good. All right, beautiful people. Well, I trust you got lots of value, and I so look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.